Hello everyone, it's wonderful to see you and it's great that we can be together again. I wonder if you are any good at taking advice. You know, the kinds of things that people will say to us to keep us safe or when they're trying to help us. Perhaps the kind of thing that a parent would say, or maybe a teacher, or maybe a big brother or sister. Don't run in the corridor. Remember to brush your teeth. Don't you cross that road until there's a green man. All these kinds of advice, they're there to keep us safe and to keep us healthy. And of course, these days we have all sorts of advice, don't we? Remember to keep washing your hands. Please keep a safe distance. And of course, when we're in the shops, remember to wear your mask. And of course, these are all meant to keep us safe and healthy. But you know, there are people who are not very good at taking advice. They don't listen and they think that they know better. I have a story about a man who wasn't very good at taking advice. He thought he knew better and so he didn't take his brother's advice. And it didn't go too well for him. Let's listen to the story now. Once there were two brothers, Jim and George. And although they were brothers, they were as different as could be. They were like chalk and cheese. One day, they each decided to build a new house. Jim made plans to build his house on the rock so that it had good, firm foundations. But George said, "That will take you months and months." "Yes," said Jim, "but I want to do it properly. I am going to live in this house for the rest of my life." But George just laughed. His plan was to live on the beach. He loved the beach, and he thought it would be great fun to actually live on the beach. Not beside the beach or close to the beach, but actually on the beach. So he decided to build his house on the sand. "I'm going to buy a flat pack house and have it up in a jiffy. Not going to bother with all that deep and firm foundations malarkey," George told his brother. Jim said to George that he didn't think that was a good idea, building his house on the sand. But George wouldn't listen. So George's house duly arrived, and he did build it in one day and moved in a few days later. Meanwhile, Jim worked on his house for months and months. He dug into the rocks, laid deep foundations, and built his house on the rock. While Jim slaved away on site, George relaxed on the beach and enjoyed the summer. Eventually, Jim's house was ready and he moved in, but by that time the summer was over and the cold, crisp autumn winds were beginning to blow. But both brothers were nice and cosy in their new houses. That was until the night of the big storm. The wind howled and the rain poured down. The wind got stronger and the rain got heavier and the seawater got higher and higher. Jim was comfortable in his new house. In fact, he could hardly hear the wind and rain at all. His house on the rock was so snug. But in George's house, it was a different story. The rain battered against the windows. Water swished around the walls of the house. George was very frightened. He thought his house might fall down any minute. So he got out of the house, and not a moment too soon, because with the next big gust of wind, the house fell down with a mighty crash. Not one wall was left standing. George was heartbroken. His beautiful house on the beach was destroyed. Later, poor George went to his brother's door, dripping wet. "Please let me come in," he said. And without even saying, "I told you so," his brother let him come in and made sure he was dry and warm again. In the days that followed, George began to plan to build a new house. He chose this time to build a house on the rock right beside Jim's house, and put Jim in charge to make sure his house was built properly this time. I hope you enjoyed that story. That story was called The House on the Rock, and that was a retelling of a story that Jesus once told, a parable, which, remember, means a story, a simple story, but a story that's got an important message. And of course, Jesus was always trying to give people good advice. He was always trying to help people. But some people didn't want to listen, not even to Jesus. And Jesus would say to people, "Anyone who hears my words and does what I say is like a man who built his house on the rock." And we know, of course, that that's what Jim in the story did. He built his house on the rock, and when the storm came, because his foundations were firm and deep, his house was safe. But poor George, his brother George, well, we know that he built his house on the sand, and he didn't want to take any good advice from Jim or from anyone else. And what happened to the house that he built on the sand? Well, when the storm came, it was just blown over, it was crushed, just like a sandcastle on the beach. Until we see each other again, stay safe. God bless.